Hey y'all, this is Ryan Monso, and this is the Talking About Them Cougars podcast from GoCoogs.com in affiliation with Dave Campbell's ROF Podcast Network. Before we get into the podcast, let me tell you about Stuart Gus. Car accidents can happen anytime in Houston, and at GoCoogs, we're proud to let you know that you can trust that Stuart Gus Injury Lawyers will take care of you. Stuart Gus is a proud U of H law alum, and now his firm has partnered with U of H and are the official injury lawyers of Houston Athletics. Stuart Gus has been helping Houstonians recover from car accidents for over 20 years. After a car accident, you can trust Gus and his team to tackle the insurance company and get you what you deserve. Call 866-TRUST-GUS, that's TRUSTGUSS, or visit trustgus.com for a free consultation. That's 866-TRUST-GUS or trustgus.com. So I'm here with Brad Towns, former U of H athlete, and Brad played in the Southwest Conference. Brad, welcome to the Big 12.
Hey, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. Well, I say it's good to be back. It's a completely different animal than the old Southwest Conference that I remember.
Explain that.
Well, the scale is dramatically bigger, and it's a different era. It's a different time to be alive. If we didn't have this amount of media attention, and we didn't have this many different forms of media and quote unquote journalism. Back then it would be just your local newspaper writers, maybe some national people, a few, but you didn't have a whole bunch of different networks. You didn't have a whole bunch of different, I guess, podcasters and internet people like us. Um,
Yeah.
you just didn't it. You didn't have as many, and you didn't have it as big. I mean, regional coverage back then would be Phil Steele, Dave Campbell. It would be HSE
Yeah.
before it turned into
Raycom,
Prime,
HSE.
before it turned into Prime Network or whatever.
Yeah.
Home Sports Entertainment with Norm Hitzges.
Yeah. Founded by U of H alum. And now I'm blanking on his name.
But I mean, it was completely. It kind of blew my mind of just the thought that originally I'd always been thinking when we're going back into the going into the Big 12, it's going to be just like kind of like going home back to the Southwest Conference. But when you look around, the minute I walked through the doors of AT&T Stadium, aka Jera World, I immediately learned that this is a different animal. This is a lot bigger.
Yeah. So just as an FYI, Brad and I both went to Big 12 Media Days last week. And as soon as you walked in the doors, you realized that this was not anything close to what U of H has dealt with at any point in the last 25 years. There were over 1,000 media members on the field at Jerry World. There were 2 rows of what they call Radio Row. There was several hundred seats for the media in front of the stage where coaches would come up, where Brett Yormark spoke. And the scale of it was just massive. When I started covering U of H, it was at Hoffman's Pavilion, and we would have a media room underneath the stands through the old tunnel to the right, and it was just a room with a couple of chairs, a table, and 2 Domino's pizzas brought in for us. And it would be the Daily Cougar guys, it would be Jerry Wizig, and it would be Chris Gardner from Houston Roundball Review. And that was it. And we sat there amongst dozens of national people that you read and see on television every single day. And so for that scale, for U of H to be in that league was a little bit mind blowing. And for us to be on the fringes of that sort of media coverage was a little crazy too. Now, they did allow a lot of podcasters, a lot of websites like ours to take part, and it was awesome. It was great for all of us. And it's just another way the Big 12 is a little bit different now with Brett Yormark running the show. So tell me about your thoughts on the event, the Big 12 Media Days, what you got out of it, any surprises?
Um, no real surprises. Uh, I did. I gained a different or a better appreciation of the coaches that are in the Big 12. Some impressed me, some not as impressive. The ones that impressed me, Dave Aranda, really stood out to me. That guy's different, man. And when
Very.
I say different, I mean I say different and really good. I mean when he was talking, I couldn't help but just kind of be drawn into his calm style. And he's kind of calm and soothing, but he's not what you expect of a football coach.
No, not at all.
I mean, I expect of a football coach. I'm looking at guys like Chris Kleinman or Lance Leipold. Those guys were just hardcore football guys.
Mhm.
Um, But man, Dave Aranda just I think he spent more time talking about, kind of a mental approach and a personal approach and with people as opposed to just talking about football.
Yeah.
Football, it seems to me that football is a part of what he does, but what he's really doing is developing people. And that's kind of the way I'm across. I mean, the guy's sitting there quoting a little bit of scripture and C.S. Lewis. He's talking, and then he talked about his father and told a really touching story about kind of bond and connect with his father before he passed away. Oh, and he also he also used the term "way cool"
A lot.
like like 5 or 6 different times, and it threw me for a loop because I mean, he's kind of been all over the country as a football guy. At what Utah State he was a while,
Yep.
Wisconsin, LSU, now Baylor. But I forget at its core he's a California guy.
Hmm.
So it's like, oh yeah, okay, so that all makes sense. But he just really, really impressive.
He brought you in on three levels, right? California guy, deeply religious man, football coach. And he weaves those three in together in a way that I have never seen. I don't think of looking at him as a California guy. I
No, no,
think looking at him as an assassin, right?
right.
And so when he starts speaking that way, it was a little bit of a shock to my system because he just never spoke a lot at LSU, and I really haven't heard a lot of him at Baylor.
Well, and
But he was a different level than anybody else that spoke.
right.
Sataki from BYU was close, but Aranda was just a different level. And I'll tell you, of all the thousands of media people that were in attendance, basically when a coach got up, they would walk out and go over here and do this and go get a drink, and nobody moved when he was on stage. And everybody just sat wrapped and listening, and because he's just so different and authentic. And it moved me enough to write about it on our website.
Yeah.
And that guy definitely was the surprise for me, um,
When
and kind of set the tone for the whole couple of days.
and even just when he was done, after he was done later on in the evening, I'm still thinking about what he was talking about because it's like everything he says is stuff that I guess it's stuff that you might think, but you don't hear it put into words.
Hmm.
Like one of the quotes that they asked him about about what he's gone through in the first three. There've been wildly different outcomes. Year was rough. Second year was a Big 12 title, and then last year was rough. They asked him what he's learned about himself. Now, it's obviously somebody who at least is very familiar with Dave Aranda because I don't think any coach gets asked, "What did you learn about yourself?"
Correct.
Nobody gets asked that question. But he went into this discussion and talked about how you have to really, really know why you're doing it. Not just for, to win ball games and, help develop like that. You really, really got to know deep down why you're doing this. Not for today, not for tomorrow, but for the long. And it's just something that I never really heard anybody talk about directly and go
Hmm.
into that kind of depth about it. And then, of course, just kind of his delivery is very, very calm. And I think we even heard him on the way back, when we were coming back to Houston after he was talking about, uh, how previously in his prior stops, like at LSU, the only thing that he had to worry about, and the only thing he was focused on was purely X's and O's. Just could do the scheme, put together the scheme, make sure everybody's doing their part, be done, and then gone. He's
Yeah.
out of
He was a
the
robot.
the transition. He said, it was a big learning curve getting the transition, and it became less about the X's and O's, and it came more about the people and the individuals and their individual emotions, their strengths and their weaknesses as human beings, as opposed to just straight up football, and how all of it kind of drives the player overall, whether it be their motivations, and their frailty.
We really talked a lot about Baylor all of a sudden, but
Well, it has
that
nothing
is
to
the
do with
one
me.
thing that stood out to me as well. Sataki was really good. That's a dude that he feels like an old school football coach, but he also feels like a really sensitive guy, very thankful to be where he is. And then the other 12 coaches in the league sounded like football coaches. Most of them coach speak, didn't tell you much. Mike Gundy kind of went after OU a little bit.
Mhm.
But other than that, it was just kind of what you would expect from a bunch of coaches who have been spending that entire day going from interview to interview to interview, pretty
Right.
much being asked the same questions
Oh, yeah.
and given the same answers.
Yeah.
I heard Dana in just walking around and experiencing it and then hearing it on TV and then on radio give the same answer to a question about 6 times. And
Right.
it's good that he's given the same answer and not a different one, but it's just the same questions over and over. And that has to be just difficult to do because you feel like you've already said something and then you
Right.
say it again and again and again. Um, but I I thought that it was an interesting experience. Getting to see and be around and work with and meet a lot of different people um, that covered these things and have a different perspective than we do was fascinating. We went to
Yeah.
dinner with the Dave Campbell's people um, Tuesday night and just got a whole different view of coaches in the state. Those guys, the Dave Campbell's people, they focus on Texas. So they don't have anything to offer on West Virginia or Kansas State, but they can get nitty gritty level on Dana Dimel or Trailer at UTSA or Sonny and at TCU and Rhett Lashley at SMU or Dana Holgorsen at Houston. Um, and they gave us a lot of information that'll help us down the road. But that is what I got out of this is the sort of background information, the background knowledge that we're going to be able to use going down the road that will inform us of how we do this gig with GoCoogs.com and with these podcasts.
And I will say that I was I was mildly impressed with Dana. He
Yeah.
looked and sounded like a different person. Really
Well,
did.
that's summer Dana, not to be confused with middle of season Dana.
Well, I mean, he looked comfortable. You know what I'm saying? He looked
Yeah.
comfortable. He didn't look put off. He seemed really engaging with everybody he was talking. Just not. I mean, he seemed to give as thoughtful an answer as he could come up with, or that he's allowed to give. I mean, because some of the stuff, when you start asking about quarterback questions, what are you going to say? You know,
Right.
we're in the middle of summer. Nobody's done any practice.
Yeah. And we'll
Um,
get to that in a bit. But Dana was more engaging. He did say that he'd just come off a 10-day vacation to
right,
Mexico, to Cabo, I believe,
right.
and had been in Miami for 4 days and then Pebble Beach. And he said he had worked as hard from June 1st to June 24th as he'd ever worked in his life. And since June 24th, had been taking a little bit of a break. And good for him. I think a head coach needs that because it's going to be an everyday thing,
Well, I mean,
pretty much starting now.
I think all coaches you definitely need to get away
Right.
because you're going 11 months out of the year, just as hard as you probably can. So if
And
you
the
don't,
calendar has changed so much with the portal and basically having you basically have four recruiting windows now. You have the two high school transfer windows, then you have the transfer portal opening in January, and then you have another one in May. And you're recruiting those guys all through June still
well, and
and getting them on campus and getting them into workouts with U of H, Dana said I had counted 37, but Dana said U of H has 42 new faces. So that's 42 guys to get through that whole introduction to campus, housing, academics, everything, and ingratiate them with the teammates, with the coaching staff, with the entire litany of services and things that they're going to be doing. And you have to do that 42 times. And
Mhm.
obviously Dana's not hands-on on all of that, but I mean, he's in charge. And the old way of doing things was a coaching staff took the whole month of July off. And that's just not the case anymore. Um, they have to kind of spread the vacations out, and some guys will go here, some are here. But the old way is pretty different. One of the things that coaches will tell you, and that I agree with, is that the calendar has to be changed because the way that this goes, that you're recruiting basically nonstop from September 1 to July 1 is just, it's too much. And we'll get into that later in a different podcast. But let's kind of switch gears. The Big 12 announced they were going to do a brand redo that will debut a year from now in the summer of 2024. This coincides with OU and Texas leaving, and the 12 schools that will be those going forward, and anybody that comes in from the Pac-12 will be in this new brand. And they started previewing some of the milder parts of it, just kind of look and feel, but not the brand itself. And it's very sleek. It's very what I would call Brooklyn Nets. A lot of black, a lot of white on black. It feels, I don't know if this is the right word, but sexy. And they debuted their new countdown ad, which is a minute-long ad that we're going to play for you in just a second, and we'll talk about. But the Big 12 is Brett Yormark is remaking it in his own image, and I have not seen anything that this guy has done that I didn't think was a home run. The countdown ad is pretty good. It's pretty powerful. It's better to see than just to hear. You're going to hear it here, and let's play that now, and come back and talk about it. It's 1 minute.
You got my back? You got my back?
We started at 12, running 11 deep, and dropping downs since 9-6. Back when the Big 8 met the Southwest, to countless wins later. And if we're talking hardware, have 7 Heisman's. Count them. With 6 by the net or 5 on the floor, we got the power. And to the new four coming our way, welcome. This is for the 4 years to make your mark. Whether it's a 3 with 3.1 on the clock or the biggest 2-point play to inspire a generation.
Let's go!
One thing's clear. We've always been greater than 12.
All right, Brad, what you got?
I think it's great. I mean, it's kind of hard to. It's difficult to phrase it because it's what you'd expect
It's way
from
different looking than a normal conference ad.
it. It's what you would expect, or it's what I would expect to see something that polished coming out of like the SEC,
Mm-hmm.
or something that polished coming out of the. And I like it because of that. I mean, you look around. college sports is competitive. We compete on the field. We compete, we compete in the financial arena. But we also you have to compete in the media market,
Yep.
and you can't afford to just have your just kind of run of the mill typical college ad. I mean, and this is the thing that we kind of wrestle with, and we get concerned about as as college sports fans, is that the game is starting to move into a more professional type setting, more
Yeah.
of a pro type setting. Um, while I still firmly believe you need to market it like a professional, like you would do the exact same thing for the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball. You have to market it as hard as you do that. Um, Hopefully, we're still able to kind of keep the college atmosphere, game day back, but that has nothing to do with the Big 12. They're not in
Right.
charge of that. They're in charge of pushing and promoting, and it makes it feel like they're ready to step up into the Big Time. Not saying that the Big 12 hasn't been big time in the past. It just seems more polished, more direct, kind of more in your face than in the past.
2 years ago, everybody thought the Big 12 was dead. After
Yeah.
OU and UT announced they were leaving, pretty much everybody was writing their eulogies for the Big 12.
Oh, absolutely.
And fast forward 2 years later, and they have a grant of rights, a new media deal that is going to pay very, very well, much higher than the Pac-12 and the ACC. They are pushing themselves, marketing themselves to younger people, to in a way that will resonate with those people. The Pac-12 looks dead. The ACC looks like they've signed a quaint little media deal that now they're on the CW as well. And the Big 12 looks like a big time. They're certainly not part of that Big 2, but they're
Right.
just behind. I mean,
Right.
it's clearly the SEC and the Big 12 or the Big 10 on one level, the Big 12 right below them, and below that you have the ACC and the Pac-12, and then the American Mountain West, whatever, the Sun Belt.
Well, and I think I like the fact that they're not going to just say, "Oh well, we're not the top two. We're just hoping to be what we do." That seems to be the opposite approach they're taking. So
Yeah.
we might not be the top two, and we're not going to say that we will ever be be a part of that top two. We're going to be the best that we could possibly
But
be.
we're going to act like the top two.
Right. No, you're going to act like you're the best, and
Yeah.
you're going to have to set the standard, if you will.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
but
that,
that's the only way to do it. Whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about business, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Whether you talk about academics, you're going to have to act as if you are the best,
hmm
and you're going to have to constantly evolve, constantly raise your game. Um,
but they've done this image remake that you could never ever see Mike Oresco or Bob Bowlesby pulling off.
no,
Right? This is a different level. When Yormark came in from Rock Nation or whatever it was, I was not sold. I thought this is weird. Why would you bring somebody in like that? But he has surrounded himself with the right people, and his ideas are genius. And he is pulling this off in a way that I just never thought possible. I didn't think the Big 12 would be this far along by the time U of H entered the league.
no.
Um, you were talking about the Southwest Conference and how it seemed sort of quaint compared to this.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was the big time in the 80s and right into the start of the early 90s.
Well, and
But it was hokey. It was small.
but that was
These guys do more media, like a player, Patrick Paul, does more media in one day at the Big 12 Media Days than he would have done an entire season in the Southwest Conference.
Oh, absolutely. And that's not the Southwest Conference wasn't that different from the other conferences either.
No, it was not.
I mean, that was before the SEC became what we know of the SEC. And the SEC has gone through what we're going through right now.
Right. But the Big 12 is microwaving that. The SEC took, a couple of decades to go from this hokey regional league to this national superpower.
Right.
The Big 12 is doing that at record speed.
Well, and the good thing is, and the thing that I appreciate, the thing that really stands out about Yormark to me is his willingness to let people know there are things that he doesn't know. He
Mhm.
doesn't try, he's not trying to be the expert in everything. That's the thing that really kind of grabbed me when his initial address is that he flat out said, I didn't know anything about college football, but I
Yeah.
surrounded myself with people who did, and I listened to them. And then I talked to ADs, and then I talked to coaches. And I want to listen to what they're saying and what they know, and leverage their experience, and then work from that. I want to learn from them as much as they're going to work with me. I thought that was brilliant, and that's a good mark of a leader. Because
Yeah.
like you, I wasn't sold initial idea. Um, I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Well, I'm there.
I mean, it's all about. I have nothing negative to say, but that one little part of me says, "Is this real? Is it
Yeah.
real?" Because everything looks really really good to start off with. Is it real? But I
Yeah.
think I think that's just kind of natural based
Everything
on what.
Yormark did public facing, fantastic. One thing, and I don't know, this is just me walking around, kind of trying to get a feel for everything. Yormark stayed on the field there at AT&T Stadium for 2 straight days, and he was kind of in the background and holding court with media members, like on a one-on-one basis. And so
Right.
people would walk up to him and talk to him, and he was there. And I've never seen a leader do something like that. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine Greg Sankey this week at SEC Media Days is going to just hang around and
Right.
talk to anybody that wants to talk to him. Yormark is building relationships in every single way, and he's doing it on a one-to-one personal level that I've never seen. And you're not going to see that pay off today, but it's going to pay off. And seeing him in that background um, way impressed me as much as anything on the front-facing stuff that he did on the stage.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, because all that's written and prepared ahead of time, and practiced and rehearsed,
Hmm.
and all that. That just watching him just kind of hang out and be available. That says a lot. It says a lot because I mean, he's got a million different things on his plate, and I don't think anybody would think twice about it if he just came and did it each and left.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think that's a sign of good, and someone not just here to do a job, but who really cares about what they're doing, believes in their believes in what they're and wants to make it as good as it could possibly be.
Yeah. All right. Let's switch gears and talk about U of H specifically.
All right.
Just to take a big gulp of water. What did we learn about U of H at Media Days?
Well, we still exist.
Yes, accurate fact check.
I mean, for us, I don't think we learned a whole lot that we didn't already know. I guess the most interesting thing, finding out that we had zero contact during fall. That we had maybe what do you
Spring.
say half, or spring. We had maybe half our roster available.
Yeah, so we've been told that, there were less than 50 guys available for spring football and that there was no contact, no aggressive snaps, as you put it, made. There was no tackling. Contact's the wrong word. There was contact. There was no tackling in the
Right.
spring. And you're going to go into a new season with 42 new guys stepping into fall ball in just a week or two who have never hit each other. And that blows my mind. I think that's really surprising. Um, and because of how the rules have changed for fall ball in the last few years, you don't get that many opportunities to hit and tackle like you did in the past. There's no two-a-days like we remember them. And I think that's going to benefit more experienced teams early on in the season than a team like U of H with 42 new ones, or West Virginia. They've got half their roster is new.
Well, I
And
think
I
you have
think that the game is going that way. There's going to be more teams with basically new rosters. but they're going to be at a disadvantage. And UTSA that first week, they've got a lot back. And how does that affect the game?
Right.
But the 42 new players is certainly not surprising because we've seen it happen. But that number, I mean, if you think about this as an 85-man scholarship roster, 105-man team roster, you can have a certain number of walk-ons. Well, 42 is half of the 85. And that's surprising. You've got new guys at quarterback, new wide receivers, new offensive linemen, I believe a new tight end, new running back, new on the defensive line, new in the defensive backfield. The kicker is new. I mean, it's just, you've got new everywhere.
Right.
And so early on, you're going to see things happen that you wouldn't see with a more experienced guy in this program. And so I think that is something to keep an eye on as the season starts. But
what I think of, they're apparently there are going to be a couple of teams in our conference, Oklahoma being another
yeah,
one
yeah.
with a lot of new faith. And we're going to have to define experience. When we say that we have guys come in that are going to be inexperienced, they've been in school, they've been at other
Correct.
schools.
Yeah.
A lot of these have been, Brett Venable made it a point to state that, they got 127, they got 127 people coming in camp, and 97 of them will be new as of last year, within the
Right.
last 2
So
years.
first or second year.
Yeah. And, we're getting a lot of guys with experience, and that's a good thing, but none of these guys have experience in this program. And none of these guys, and most importantly, none of them have experience together.
And that's the part that is the red flag to me. Quarterback and center, quarterback and receivers, quarterback and running back. Obviously, you've gotten a whole spring, but your two quarterbacks are splitting snaps 50-50. We don't have a good read on where that is. Dana has hinted that Donovan Smith is in the lead, but I don't think that means it's done.
Well, no, and I think he made it a point to clarify that he has the advantage because he's played in the Big 12 and 20, and that's true. That's 100% true. And Coley's he's taken what, maybe 21 total snaps in his career, maybe.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a huge difference.
That's fair to say. But then, let's also roll the clock back to 2007.
That is rolling it back
to when he and Sumlin first got here. I mean, Sumlin told me straight up that, after spring, if he was going to be given the job to anybody, it's Blake Joseph's job to lose.
Right. That was 2008. Art Briles' last season was 2007.
2000.
Yeah.
So I mean, anything can happen over summer, and Donovan Smith definitely has the advantage. But I think he was right, and I hope he stick that nobody knows who's going to be the starting quarterback until they run out onto the field to take the first snap.
Yeah, he didn't say that specifically, but that's kind of the hint. That's where he was going. And that's what I think is the most I don't think there's any reason for any of us to know who this quarterback is before the first game.
No, it's irrelevant for us.
The players should know about 2 weeks beforehand so that guy can get all the reps. But it is not important to announce that. It's probably to their advantage not to announce it. But Dana said one other thing. He did not say it in the media avails that we had with him, whether it was on stage or late in the day. He took questions for mainly local media, local TV, local writers, Joseph Duarte, Daily Cougar, us, and some of the podcasts. But after, or I guess during his day, the car wash, where he was going from interview to interview, he stopped with Sirius XM and talked to the Big 12 channel guys, which, by the way, we're in a league that has our own channel with content every single day. Love that. And I want you to listen to what he says here, mainly about calling plays and what happened calling plays in 2021.
But when I took the Houston job, I needed to call the plays. And so I did for 3 years. And in 2021, it almost killed me.
Really?
Just hard,
Yeah.
And so, we were 10-1, and we were going to UConn. I said, somebody else is calling this. I need a break. We're about to play Cincinnati a week later in the championship game. I'm like, I need a break. But I didn't ever leave the room. And so I knew what was on the sheet, and I knew what we were trying to do. And Shannon Dawson did a really good job of calling it. And so I rolled with that the next year. But the job is so much different right now than it was 2 years ago. Where I spend my time is important. So I'm not going to call it, but I'm not going to leave the room. You know what I mean? So as long as it's on that sheet and I know, what we're going to call in certain situations, I've got the same guy that's been upstairs for me for 12 years. And so he's doing most of the play calling anyway, and so what I learned from the 2 years at West Virginia not calling it, this past year not calling it, is as long as I'm in that room all week and I understand what's on that sheet, I'm comfortable with whoever calls the plays.
So Dana says calling plays nearly killed him, which I think is just the stress that he was under. That whole season was quite a journey, especially for Dana. After Texas Tech, he had to win Rice or something was going to happen. It has been relayed to me that his job was on the line. I don't know if they would have followed through with that, but that was the threat. And he's coaching all year and finally gets to the UConn game. They are already in the AAC title game. And he gives up play calling to Shannon Dawson. And that game was, I remember it being kind of lame and just getting through it.
Right.
And then Dawson called plays at Cincinnati and then started the next year, 2022, calling plays. And I think we all agree that Dana kind of took over play calling later in the year. He, at one point this week, said that, he'd been kicked out of the air raid, but he'd been invited back in the last half of last season. And the numbers show that U of H threw the ball a lot more in the second half of the year than they did in the first half. I think
A ton more.
Tank Dell was like somewhere at 17 targets a game in the back half of the season. I mean, Clayton Tune was snapping the ball and looking for Dell immediately.
Well, I mean, the back half of the season, there
It was a
were
much worse schedule.
well, it was definitely a much worse schedule, but you had to just let it fly. The back half of the season, 2 games were threw the ball 50 plus times, and then we had 3 others, I believe, of 40 plus, and another one that was 39. The most we had thrown in the early season was, I think we threw 39 in double overtime at Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it was dramatically different. Now,
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of quantify why that change happened, because it just happened to coincide when we were playing really, really terrible defensive. The question that I'm still dumbfounded on is why we stopped throwing the game, but that's just an exhibition.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really.
But it was a
cares.
lot different. It was a lot different. It was a lot more successful. Kind of,
Yep.
it was starting to give me that thought of, okay, this is what I expected day one. This is what I was looking for.
So going into this year, Dana says that he will not call plays. Coming after Dawson left and before Burchett was promoted to quarterbacks coach and before Nagavi came in as OL coach and run game coordinator, Dana left it open as to how that would work. And now it sounds like Burchett will call the plays. He will, Dana will be in the room all week as that game plan is developed. But do you think it stays with a first year assistant calling plays all year?
Well, I mean, it could be really, really good, or it could be a complete train wreck.
Yeah.
Because you never know how someone's going until they actually get the shot.
Right.
I mean, this guy could be He could be a 25-year veteran of being on every great offensive staff and could turn out to be a terrible play caller.
Yeah.
Or he could be the next Brady at LSU and be the next wonderkin and be an elite play caller and the most brilliant strategist known to man.
Right. But that helped that he had elite talent at receiver, running back, and quarterback, and
Experience.
I think an experience. And that's the rub here this year, is that Burchett could call a perfect season, but maybe U of H doesn't have the players to execute. Or on the flip, the players might gel and then the play calling is just bad. And
Yeah.
so you have so many variables this year that you not necessarily would have had. Like last year, you had a quarterback and a number one wide receiver and a play caller that knew each other. Now that play caller changed and the play calling changed, and they were fairly successful with that. Lost to Tulsa, lost to SMU, scored a ton, but lost. And so I am fascinated how this works out, how it looks in fall ball. They won't tell us how it looks. They won't give us any real inside info. We're going to try, but something is going to be seen. We're going to see something from UTSA and Rice before TCU. I think you learn a lot about this team. The TCU game in that week 3 is perfectly set for everything. It's your intro to the Big 12. You've had 2 weeks to get your stuff together as a play caller, as a staff,
Right.
and as new players in a system.
Right.
Then you get week 3 at home, TCU. Everything has come together for that game. I mean, everything. And I expect to see a much better team in week 3 than I did in week 1.
Oh yeah, I mean,
But
it's definitely going to be a work in progress. How it plays out, I don't know. I mean, I know that a lot of people, we kind of go between, we got to kind of go between two extremes of, hey, it's just football. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're playing it. It's just, just the guy in front of you. Except it's not.
no.
These aren't the kids that you're playing against. These aren't the kids you're fighting against. Not bad, not terrible players. I mean, they are players, and some of them weigh a lot too. Some of them are pretty good size, but we know from experience that usually they're a different caliber there. We better hope so because that's where we're getting our recruit from
Yeah.
our transfer pool. So they better be a step above.
Yeah.
So nobody knows for sure until we step out, and then it's going to take getting punched in the face a few dozen times to kind of start figuring out what you can do. Which I mean, honestly, I expect the first couple of games of hearing, well, didn't want to put anything on film.
Yeah, you might hear that.
It's a deal where we don't want to put that.
Here's the thing, and you've brought this up, and I have warmed to this a lot, is that half of this schedule is an AAC schedule.
Yep.
In the first month, September is close to just being an AAC schedule. You play UTSA and Rice. You played them both last year. Then you get TCU. That's a step above. That's something different. And then Sam Houston, okay, that's in line with an AAC. And then you get Tech, who you played last year and the year before. So that first month looks a lot like what you've been used to. And so as you see the team getting better, if they're getting better, they're doing it against teams that they have basically played over the last few years. TCU is different. And now once you get into October, the schedule gets weird. And we're going to have a whole podcast about the schedule coming up very soon. But my main point is that September looks an awful lot like what you have experienced the last few years. So from that point of view, from the schedule point of view, you're not getting anything like a huge step up. But that's good because you're trying a whole bunch of new stuff out in that first month.
And fortunately for us, we're not playing the TC that played
From last year.
championship.
Right.
We're not facing a 15 year season and Dugan at quarterback. Guess what?
I think he and I are the same age.
They got a brand new quarterback. So, they're going to be a different team.
Yeah, there's a lot of brand new quarterbacks in this league.
Yeah.
And you're going to just see that every single year now because of the portal and because second stringers are not willing to wait. And guys that get demoted are not willing to fight it out. And that's going to be good and bad. I find it interesting, just all the quarterbacks that are out there that are starting the first time this year and how many will stay. How many of the guys we see this year will stay?
I mean, I did a triple take whenever I heard at the Big 12 Media Day. I heard Keaton Slovis's. I'm like, hold on.
Yep.
I remember him 14 years ago. Oh no, that was just a few years back. Oh yeah, he was. Yeah. That's right. He was a freshman at USC the same time JT Daniels was a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
And he bounced around. I guess he went to Pitt, and now where did he land?
BYU.
BYU. Yeah.
And JT Daniels, we'll see in week 2 at Rice.
I don't blame quarterbacks because realistically, only one quarterback plays.
Yeah.
Every other position on the field, you can platoon people. You can't and you shouldn't at quarterback. You got a starter and you're going.
Right. Well, every other position comes out for a break. Quarterback doesn't. And,
right.
You've got to go be that number one guy if that's what you think you are. And so that's fine. And good for him. All right. Coming up, we're going to have just a ton of content coming on GoCoogs.com. More podcasts. We're going to sort of go into a couple of different shows. We're going to do it a little different way this year with the Big 12. We want to thank Gus Injury Lawyers. Those guys are fantastic. They have been such a big help for us. We can't wait to do some different things this season because of this partnership. Call 866-TRUST-GUS or visit trustgus.com. That's GUSS for a free consultation. Brad, thanks so much. We're going to keep doing this all year. We're part of the Dave Campbell's Republic of Football podcast network. GoCoogs.com, GoCoogs1 on Twitter, Instagram, Threads. Is that still a thing? Facebook?
I think it still is.
TikTok? Any social media that comes out between the time we record this and you hear it, we're probably on that one too. And on YouTube. So check us out. We've got stuff everywhere. A lot of ideas, a lot of stuff. Thanks so much for listening. Take it out, Renu.
Yahoo!